A huge scientific and moral debate is brewing tonight after a landmark decision in the UK where the Ethics Council gave the green light to genetically modified babies, meaning that parents could choose what DNA they do and do not want their children to have. The Guardian newspaper writing, quote, the UK-based Nuffield Council on Bioethics says changing the DNA of a human embryo could be morally permissible if it is in the child's best interests. Joining me now, Marc Thiessen, American Enterprise Institute scholar and Fox News contributor, and Father Jonathan Morris, Fox News religion analyst. So at this point, you can't create genetically altered babies, but you can edit the genes to prevent certain serious diseases. Father Jonathan, on the morality of this, your thoughts?
Anytime you have scientific advances that are for the good of the human being, right, and especially in this case, for the good of the child, wonderful. But when we're using scientific advances for the good of the people who want that child to be something for them, that's when we have problems. A human being can never be used as a means to an end. A human being is an end in and of itself. And of course, if you had perfectly moral people, then these type of scientific advances would not be a problem. But we know that put into the hands of people who are imperfect, like all of us, well, there can be some very scary purposes and means.
I mean, this is the basics of medical ethics. When you have the ability to do something, but then you have to make the decision about whether or not it is ethical or whether or not it's good for humanity and for society. This is a quote from one of the authors of the study, Alan Bradley. He says, this is the first systematic assessment of unexpected events resulting from CRISPR editing, which is what it's called, in therapeutically relevant cells. And we found that changes in the DNA have been seriously underestimated before now. So my unscientific brain, Marc, in taking a look at this earlier, basically it means that when you do those alterations, you don't know what kind of impact they're going to have on all the other cells that are affected in the embryo.
Yeah, this is medical experimentation on human beings.
Yeah.
I mean, to do this. I mean, if we alter the faulty genes, we don't know what we're doing, what the scientists are doing to the healthy genes. And it's not just affecting that one individual child. You're changing their DNA sequence, which means their children and their children's children and their children's children will be affected by whatever changes you make in the laboratory. So it's enormously problematic. Look, everybody wants to eliminate the suffering of these genetic diseases, but there are all sorts of unintended consequences that come along with this, because if you can change the DNA in order to eliminate diseases, you can also change the DNA to make people better athletes, to make them more intelligent, to make them more attractive, and all of a sudden you get down the slippery slope of genetically altered designer babies, where parents are choosing what attributes they want for their children. That's going to have a lot of downstream impacts. One of the things it's going to do is it's going to dramatically exacerbate inequality, because only the wealthy are going to be able to afford genetic engineering. So what you will have is you will have income inequality replaced by genetic inequality, where you have two classes of people: the genetically altered elites who have more skill, more intelligence, more talent, and the unaltered poor, who are going to be even more of a lower class in society. So this has really, really big downstream consequences nobody's thought about.
Yeah, we've talked a lot on this program, Father Jonathan, about Down syndrome, and you know, the sort of Iceland rejoicing over the fact that they have 0 Down syndrome babies because they're all aborted. So if you could possibly, you know, alter that in the DNA, you know, there's so many parents that would tell you that they love their child exactly the way they are. So I mean, what is best? What is perfect? That, you know, that's our notion of what that means.
Well, what God makes is best, in my opinion. But
exactly.
another thing to keep in mind, Martha, is that very often when there's money involved, what these hospitals or governments do is they hire bioethicists to tell them that it's okay.
Yeah.
And so we have to be very careful. This was a bioethical committee organization that said, we think this is now perhaps more morally permissible. And then the government or the business or the hospital can say, oh no, we passed it by our bioethics committee and it turns out it's all good. Very dangerous.
It is dangerous. And then on the other hand, you think if you could, you know, make sure that no one is born with the body that's going to produce cancer eventually, I think we'd all want to try to strive towards that. So it's very, very tricky. Gentlemen, thank you. Father Morris,
Thanks,
always
Martha.
great to see you. Marc Thiessen, always great to have you weigh in.